So I'm responding to the claim that NCAA policies are harming college athletes. The NCAA is the National Collegiate Athlete Association. The advocate argues this by saying that college athletes first are unpaid employees, second by the NCAA and universities profiting off of its students, and third by saying that students are deprived financially and physically of the care from the schools that they attend. Regarding his first claim, he states first that the typical Division I football students devote more than 50 hours a week to playing and practicing, etc., which he claims is more than the typical work week. And then he further on argues the point by stating from Forbes.com that most players sign agreements that let the coaches and staff direct most of their activities on and off the field, including their social media and their sleeping schedules. The second point that he makes about the agreements that they have made with their staff is largely unrelated to the claim that they're unpaid employees, as most employees do not have this level of determination over their lives. Most employees, the only real determinations is their conduct and their work schedule. Him stating that all of these athletes are controlled in this way does not really relate to the claim that they're unpaid employees. Additionally, as of 2015, the NCAA enacted a policy allowing all schools to pay up to $5,000 in stipends to their athletes in order to negate personal travel costs and expenses of living such as food and gas. This policy allowed students to actually receive funding, of which before they were not allowed, technically paying them for playing in the school, as if not all students would receive this funding. Aside from scholarships, athletes are the only ones to receive these stipends from the school. Regarding his second point, that the NCAA and universities profit off of their student athletes, he first generates a statistic stating that the University of Alabama reported $443.3 million total revenue generated from their athletics program. And then he also claimed that most of the funding does not go back into the schools or the programs. This claim didn't have backing, and it's actually the opposite. An example, in 2015, the University of Arkansas generated $19.3 million in pure profit revenue from their athletics program. Of this $19.3 million, they put all of it back into the school and the athletics program to develop new policies and to clean up the program as a whole, as well as kickstart the new stadium, which was needed. Him claiming that the revenue does not go back into the school is false, because almost all schools will put in revenue back into the program that they generated. In the University of Arkansas as well, the university as a whole had to donate $0 to the athletics program to promote these new builds, allowing them to better spend their resources in other parts of the university in order to improve the university as a whole. This claim that the universities and NCAA profit isn't arguable, because it's true that the universities and NCAA do make money off of the athletics program in the school. Stating this as an argument that the NCAA policies are unfair to the students really has no relevance, as the university's profiting has nothing really to do with policies of the NCAA in regards to the students. Regarding his third point, that the students are deprived financially and physically of the care they need, he pulls an example of basketball player Kareem Abdul-Jabbar from his time in university. He was stating that he needed to pinch together pennies after his championship wins to get hamburgers and meals that he desperately didn't really have the money to afford from his small summer jobs he was able to work. This statistic is invalid because as of 2015, as mentioned before, the universities would pay the students up to $5,000 per semester for personal use. At the time that this student was in school, it was far before this policy was implemented, which is drastically changed in the NCAA's total list of policies. Whereas before it may have harmed students, as of now it does not. So using this statistic, which was very too old, it was 1969, one of the years he was in college, provides an example that has different data than what is currently available. Additionally, he states an example where one student from Colgate University, Erin Crowner, thought she would be covered for her medical injuries in training camp, but she had to pay $80,000 out of pocket for her expenses. This claim directly, it supports his claim, but the NCAA has a policy in place wherein they require all athletes to have some form of medical coverage that will cover their injuries for them to even participate in any kind of practice or in-game. The NCAA covers injuries above 90,000 and all injuries in tournaments, but their policy requires them to have medical insurance, so that the students don't have to pay if they get hurt, and if they can actually play, they would be able to have a reliable way of getting coverage to heal, like to rebuild their medical insurances. For this student to actually be able to participate in any sort of practice or game with a violation of this policy would be at fault of the school, not of the NCAA's policy as a whole, as their policy directly is aimed to prevent students from suffering injuries and debt that they would not be able to pay off as a whole. And due to this, the NCAA's current policies are actually beneficial to the students rather than the advocate's claim that they hurt due to his outdated examples and the NCAA's current updated policies. Thank you.
All right, the structural stuff is all fine. On the first point, there's an important argument that you make that suggests that the NCAA made an alteration in being able to compensate students for some of their travel needs, some of their basic needs, up to $5,000 a semester. And I'm going, okay, well, this is an important piece of information, and what's the source? I don't get a source. I'm not saying that you're making something up. It's probably something that's true, but you need to tell me where that information came from so that if I wanted to, I could verify it. At the moment, I don't have any citation here. This is your say-so on this particular point, and it's conveniently in 2015, so just a couple of years ago. So if this in fact is no longer an issue, that's a pretty damning piece of information, and it should be something that's documented and you give us a source on it, and we don't get any of that. The argument about the profiting off the athletes, so the notion that the schools do make money, but by the way, one of the things that you want to point out is that almost all of these schools are nonprofit institutions. Their goal is to service their students. When they talk about they make money off of their program, I think you do have the right answer. It says all of that money that they make is not plowed, it's not given to investors in the university who get a dividend on it. It's not some profit margin that is measured and you get a stock return, what's going on. That money is all plowed back into the school. Now, in the case of the University of Arkansas, you show some specific ways in which the money is plowed back into the school for building, constructing a new stadium, for some athletic facilities that are being talked about. Some of the other things that might be discussed for the University of Alabama, for instance, $143 million. That allows them to retain the coaches and probably hire the best coaches, which is one of the reasons why they are a superior program, because the coaches are really capable of doing their jobs, unlike the ones at USC. Yeah, we had a bad weekend. And the notion that in the long run, that the students at the universities are the ones who benefit from this, not some corporation, I think is a pretty well made point. The example of the University of Arkansas, that's a good example. Once again, I think sourcing would be a good idea for that. And then your argument on the third point is basically suggesting that the example that the advocate used is so untimely from 1969 that it's hard to make any inference about. Plus, with the interceding change in the NCAA regulations, it's a policy that's way outdated by comparison. I think that also, again, that's another place where you're applying applying the same argument, and another reason why it ought to be documented a little bit more effectively. The story of the student at Colgate, for instance, I do like the idea that you have here that suggests this is the fault of the university, not the NCAA, because the NCAA requires that students to participate have to be covered by insurance up to $80,000, and then they provide a supplemental policy after that. I don't know what the basis of this lawsuit was, but if you could cite the specific NCAA policy, tell us where you found that policy and what the rules say, that would be more effective. Again, I'm not suggesting that you're making stuff up. I'm suggesting that you cite the sources for when you get this information and present it. All right, thank you.